everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Between Sessions with Berries. Today's guest is Ken Mallon, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a background that it's very unique and it's brilliant. I just love this background. I've been so excited to interview him. Before becoming a full-time therapist, Ken spent 25 years in executive roles at tech giants like Yahoo, Microsoft, Meta, leading teams in AI, machine learning, and data science. He also holds advanced degrees from Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and Notre Dame, which is amazing to me. He now runs Mallon Advisory and Counseling Services in California, where he integrates his deep tech experience into his clinical work. So if you've ever wondered what the future of AI and mental health might actually look like, this is the conversation you want to hear. So Ken, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. Your journey from biotech to big tech to private practice is fascinating to me. And I just would love to talk about what drew you into each chapter and what ultimately made you decide to pursue full-time therapy. How did that happen? I just can't wait to hear the story.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the story. I was a graduate student in statistics at Stanford. And Stanford, as you know, has a pretty good medical school. And I got exposed to some of the medical students who wanted help with statistics. Some of them are not very good at data analysis. And I started getting involved in that, and I decided I'd kind of like healthcare. And so when I graduated, I went to work for UC San Francisco Medical School doing HIV and AIDS research and other research. And looking around me, I realized I don't know anything about the biological sciences. And I was surrounded by physicians and epidemiologists and researchers. And I thought, I better go back to school and learn more about science. And so I started to apply to schools, and they said, Ken, we can't take you into a graduate program in virology or epidemiology because you don't have enough undergrad. And I said, well, what can we do? And so I was very happy and grateful that Johns Hopkins decided to do something for me. They admitted me into their PhD program in biostatistics, but allowed me to take a lot of courses in the sciences. And so this is the way for me to leverage my statistical and mathematical background, but learn a lot about virology and infectious diseases. When I graduated from Johns Hopkins, I worked in biotech doing mostly HIV, AIDS, and some pulmonary research. And I was there for about 8 years working at Amgen and Genentech, and also did a vaccine startup. And I was doing this vaccine startup in this little biotech park in Santa Clara, California, which is pretty much like the heart of Silicon Valley. And so if you can imagine some startup culture where you're in kind of a little business park, and the biotech companies are coming and going so fast that they're literally taking the signs off one day.
Oh my gosh.
Another sign. But the biotech
I
company next door to mine was renting out their second floor to a rapidly growing company. Now, this is 1999, a rapidly growing company called Yahoo.
Oh my gosh.
I thought,
Just a little company
kind of
called
an
Yahoo.
odd company sitting here in this biotech park, but I thought it was really cool. And so when my biotech vaccine startup got bought by a large pharma company, I didn't want to move to New Jersey and be part of big pharma. That's just not how I'm wired. I'm kind of a startup innovation guy. And there was this cool startup innovation company next door. So I tried to join, and they say to me, great, join. What do you know about advertising? What do you know about the internet? I said, nothing and nothing. And is that okay?
It's almost like, what is the internet at that point? Yeah, right.
Well, what do you know about? I said, I know a lot about data and data analysis and big data. And they said, well, we've been kind of wanting to try to use data for something, but we haven't been able to figure out how exactly. Would you mind joining and doing that? And so I joined Yahoo in early 2000 to basically start up their very first data science organization. It sounds crazy now, but back then, there was no such thing as behavioral targeting. In other words, when you did a search or consume content, we automatically assume these days that now you're going to get an ad, right?
Exactly.
The internet's spying on you, and they're going to give you some sort of ad that they're going to say is relevant. Well, that all happened in about 2000. I built this team, and we started trying to figure out how are we going to make ads better? How are we going to monetize the internet better? And I spent the next 25 years, building mostly advertising related products, targeting and advertising measurement products using machine learning, AI technologies, large language models, and so forth.
That is fascinating. So where was the tipping point where you decided I'm going to leave tech behind and fully step into this work as a clinician?
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen? It's so interesting.
It's a personal story. I went through a divorce in the mid 2000s, and with that process, I decided, okay, I'm going to essentially be operating as a single parent half of the time. I better learn a heck of a lot about child development, how kids adjust to divorce, how to get along better with their mom, and all these things. So I started deeply studying child development and relationships and so forth. And it led me to actually start learning a lot about custody evaluations and child custody. And I actually started to work in that capacity. I started to volunteer helping people do custody evaluations, doing divorce mediation. For some reason, I just had some natural talent to listen to people and mediate and find common ground between people. This is before I, formally studied psychology. And so some years later, my daughter was in high school and she wanted to go on some college trips. And so I started taking her on college trips to the East Coast and all over. And I would be carrying psychology and child development books with me on the airplane. And, she would just be nagging me saying, "Hey, Dad, you should go back to school too. I'm applying. Why don't you come with me?"
Oh my gosh, how
And she
fun.
noticed me sniffing around the psychology departments whenever we went traveling. And, she eventually convinced me. She said, "Dad, you should go back to school." And I said, "Daughter, there's two big problems. Number one, I'm 51 years old. And number two, I'm 51 years old. Like this can be double emphasized. I'm not going back to school at this point." But she convinced me. And I decided to figure out how to make it work. And I did it by going to school at evenings and weekends. And at the time, I was the chief product officer of a startup called Forinfo, which was in San Mateo, California. But I went to school evenings or weekends for 3 years to get my master's degree in clinical psychology. So I think if you were to ask, like, what's the tipping point? I think the combination of me seeing a massive need for more therapists helping families, combined with me getting a bit burnt out from tech. And frankly, some ageism. I was 50 and it's hard to keep up. I was, 20 years removed from my most recent graduate degree. I thought, okay, let me get another graduate degree.
Yeah, why not?
It's a pivot.
That's
It's a pretty
amazing.
big
So
pivot, though.
did you stay or have you stayed in that? I mean, you have a consulting business. Have you stayed like in the family therapy type realm
I
or have
have.
you branched
Yeah,
out? Okay.
actually,
Okay.
what
Interesting.
happened is in 2016, I went back to school, but I continued my day job in tech. I've continued to work in tech actually up until this year. And so I had been working in these tech roles while in parallel developing my private practice. And my private practice is primarily focused on bringing greater harmony to families. So we do couples work, we do divorce work, we help individuals that have relationship issues, we help children who are struggling because they're living in two houses or their parents have separated.
Oh, I love that so much. And I wonder, like, just talking with you about it, it's like you go from high level executive in tech to clinical practice. It seems like a major shift, but I guess you're still taking on that role, sort of an executive managing these systems within the families almost. I just wonder, were there challenges with that, or did you just feel like a natural transition because of the experience you already had?
I'd like to say it's natural. It's not at all natural. It
Okay.
goes from
Yeah.
like right brain, or I should say left brain, and just sort of being the boss and running stuff to all of a sudden this very humble role where you're a trainee at a community mental health place doing a practical.
Yes.
And by the way, these community mental health clinics tend to have extremely outdated technologies. So I was like,
Gosh.
paper? What? You want me to fill out a form and then hand it in? And I need a signature and then I have to fax it? Like I couldn't believe it. And so
Oh my
I
gosh.
decided that when I get a private practice, it's going to be the sweetest, smoothest technology platform you can possibly imagine. And so
Super
it is.
techified.
But I didn't want paper and want life. Yeah, it's a big adjustment because I had to say to myself, listen, I'm starting at the very, very bottom rung here. I have a lot of life experience, which helps me, but I just have to say, I need to learn. I don't know everything about mental health, and there's experts surrounding me. And so I spent those 3 years soaking it in. And then, as you know, once you become a therapist and you graduate, you still have to complete 3,000 hours of experience before you can apply for licensure. So there's a pretty long journey. There's a 5, 6, 7 year journey for most therapists from starting graduate school to become licensed.
Absolutely. Yeah, what a commitment too, that you're like, "I'm doing this. Okay, I'm
I'm
all in.
doing
I'm
this.
51. I'm starting this." Because it really is when you think back when I think back on it now, it's like, "Gosh, how did I do all that? All those free internships and, having to work nights and overnights to make up the difference to get the hours." And gosh, it's tough.
Now, I was working as a tech exec, running part of a company or managing our big business line, flying around the country. I remember several times flying in from New York or elsewhere in the East Coast, landing in San Francisco and having to go straight to my class. It was starting
Oh my
at
gosh.
7 p.m.
Oh my
We'll
gosh,
get
right.
home at 9:30, and which feels like past midnight East Coast time, and
Yeah.
possibly having homework to do. So it was a
Yes.
pretty long journey.
So you were literally going in-person classes too, because
Yeah,
I
this
think
was.
now in my mind, it's like grad school is like online a lot for a lot of people, but maybe not.
I know
I don't
that. So
even know.
you make a
I'm out
good
of
point. I
touch.
need to remind people this was 2016 to 2019. It was
Yeah.
COVID. So
Yes.
yeah, none of it was online. It was
Oh
all
my
face to
goodness.
face.
That is amazing. Yeah, that you did that. It really is. So did you ever have doubts or fears, like how your tech background and all of that would be accepted in the therapy world, or were you like, whatever, I'm going to do me and just see
No,
how
I
it goes?
initially thought that I would not integrate it or pay much attention to it, but it has helped me in two major ways. First of all, I think it makes the tech community more comfortable with me as a therapist. I think when people do searches online and choose a therapist, first of all, there aren't very many men doing this. And so I think that appeals to some people. There also are not very many people with gray hair in this field, and sometimes people want that lived experience. So even though when I first started I was pretty junior, people look at me and say, "Oh, this guy's got something additional to contribute." And then I think the other thing was that I did end up integrating some of my background into my actual practice by having measurement and using AI tools and things like that. But I think that overall, I think the appeal was people looking and saying, "Oh, he worked at Doc or he worked at Microsoft, maybe he'll understand." And so a lot of my clients, especially in the beginning, were working at Apple, at Google, and Amazon, and Meta, Facebook.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I knew their stresses in and out. I literally worked there. I had to
Yes.
hire and fire people. So I knew
That's
in
amazing.
detail every aspect of their work.
Yeah. And probably how it affect their family lives too,
How it
I would
affects their
imagine.
family lives, their stress, all kinds of worries that they have.
That's so interesting. So do you have advice for, a clinician or a not later in life because I'm 50 now myself. I feel like I'm so young, but somebody that's like, okay, I'm doing this career, but I just want to switch careers completely. Like, do you have advice how to transition into like a totally new career that's just not what you've been doing before?
That's a great question. I think there's two things that pop into my mind. One is if you are going to make a major transition like that, it has to be passion driven. You can't make that thinking, "Oh, I need to do this because I'm going to make X dollars or I'm going to change my lifestyle or something like that," because it's going to be hard. These kinds of transitions are hard. It's going to be unsettling. Income may change. All kinds of things can come up. And if that passion isn't there, if you're not driven and you have that focus and that visual, this is what I'm going to be and this is what I'm going to do, you're not going to have as much resilience to the bumps in the road that may occur. So that's point one. The second one, I think, is to do it gradually. And this is hard. But a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to do this other things." That's really hard to do. I mean, especially if you're making a transition as an adult who has 10 or 20 years of experience already in a career, your family might rely on that income. And so what I did, it's hard, but I did both.
Yeah.
And, you just have to say to yourself, "I can do this for some period of time." And so I basically did both for a period of time. Now, for me, it ended up being 9 years. It doesn't have to be, but I actually retired from tech back in 2020 during the pandemic. And I was completely out of it doing my practice full time for a full year. But then Meta reached out to me with a special opportunity. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do one more tech gig. And so I did that 3-year gig from 2022 to 2025. But had that not occurred, it really would have only been about a 4-year journey to get going. And so I think that, yeah, it's hard, but you know what? If you think about the grand scheme of things, life is long, right? And why not invest some time for 4 or 5 years to potentially change your life?
Absolutely. Could you share about the meta opportunity? Because I'm thinking about myself and also this age of AI and, how important consultancy is becoming and also being tech savvy just in my own world and being able to have this background as a therapist. A lot of these tech companies, AI companies really appreciate that perspective because they want to know, how does the psychology work? How can you help incorporate the psychology into AI or into like these tech innovations that we're doing? So I'm just curious, did it blend for you when they reached out back out, or is it something totally different?
Absolutely. They reached out initially because they wanted to fill some advertising technology positions. They wanted a product leader in ad tech. They wanted a data science leader in ad tech. And I just kept saying no to these kinds of things. I said, I'm out of ad tech. I'm out of tech. I'm enjoying my work. Leave me alone. And I said no for about 6 months. And then at a certain point, they said, will you do anything here? Is there anything that interests you? And I was quite interested in what was going on in the VR and AR and MR space. And I was interested in thinking about how can we make things safe in the metaverse? How can we make things safer for people? And so they allowed me to start up a new team that was focused on keeping people safe. And we called it the Trust Organization, but it involved, data safety and security and people's well-being. And so at that time, I was pretty impressed because I think Meta had learned a little bit and decided that they were going to invest in a set of data scientists who had multidisciplinary backgrounds. So it's kind of cool because there was me who had advanced degrees in both data analytics and also psychology. But there are also people who had dual degrees in things might involve ethics or social psychology and so forth. So it was a really, really neat time to be immersed in incredibly talented people who understood both data and some core social science.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, just going along those lines, you had mentioned earlier that you worked in agencies. You saw how like archaic they were and just like probably non-functioning. Like I remember working in these terrible agencies with files and it was just awful. And saying that you want your practice to run smoothly and it's not going to be like that. So, I'd love to talk about that. Like, how are you using tech? How are you using AI in your practice to run it, to keep it going smoothly, especially for the listener that might be new to private practice or struggling with keeping their practice running smoothly? What kind of advice can you give for that? Like, what's the workflows, the tech, the AI that's making it work for you?
Yeah, I think that experience at the community mental health convinced me that I really need to invest and understand the operational side and the process side of private practice. And so I really studied it. I wanted to see what's going on, how much does it cost to run private practices, because I wanted something really lean. I didn't want to spend a lot of time with administration. And I made a personal choice to not impanel with insurance. And this is personal choice, but that was kind of a big thing because it means I'm getting paid immediately by clients. It means I don't have to go through all this hassle with the panels. I don't have to work with some intermediary who's going to get me impaneled and so forth. And also, they don't pay out that well. So that's great for me as a business person. But what about for the client? The client likes to be insurance reimbursed. But what a lot of people don't understand is that you can see it out of network therapists. You just have to submit, those claims to your insurance company. And by the way, most of them, certainly PPOs, will reimburse. And it's typically about 70%. And people don't really realize this. When they reach out to therapists, they say, hey, do you take such and such insurance? And if the answer is no, like, see ya. You really need to think about it. Am I willing to pay 30% instead of zero in exchange for protecting my privacy and not having to share information with potentially my employer or insurance companies and so forth? So that's one piece. I'm not exactly answering your question, but it was
No,
an
no,
emotional
it's
part
it's a good
because it
point
meant
and having a workflow for
it
that.
meant that
Yeah.
I wanted to have a really small cost footprint and I wanted the company to be really lean. And so that meant I started thinking about, okay, what are all the technologies that I need? I need a payroll. So I got a really good lean, modern payroll system where it does onboarding of new therapists and just spits out the payroll and takes care of all the documentation, everything. I don't have to touch it whatsoever. It just runs. There's also accounting. So I got some good modern accounting software that gives me my P&L information so I can work with my accountant. My accountant is actually integrated right into it. So I don't even have to contact her. She
Nice.
just gets it and files my taxes. And it's all
Wonderful.
beautiful. I think the other thing is, of course, you have to have a good EHR platform to manage, the clients and do video, because probably about 70% of my practice is video based. You need that. You need the consent forms and all those kinds of things. And I decided I would have a practice completely paper free. So I have no paper whatsoever. I don't have file cabinets. I don't fax anything. I don't have a fax machine. And that's a beautiful thing. And then the final thing is, probably about a year and a half ago, I started using AI, mostly for note taking. But now I use AI for all aspects of the clinical work that I do. I think the most exciting thing is I'm using Barry's AI, which has a great platform. And the coolest thing that they just started very recently is something called the Assistant.
Yes.
And I had been using ChatGPT on my own in kind of an assistant way, but it was difficult because I had to protect privacy and I didn't want to just openly use ChatGPT every day. But because Barry's is able to keep things contained, I can sit and have those brainstorming sessions with the assistant and say, hey, in 40 minutes, I'm meeting with so-and-so, help me prepare. And they said, this is all this information. Oh, yeah, I forgot. They went on
Exactly.
vacation. You'd ask them about Hawaii. And there's also some case conceptualization that I do. I'll say, I'll ask the assistant, I've tried this and that. I'm not happy with what I'm seeing. What other ideas do you have? And here's some ideas. And
Isn't
that's
it
just a beautiful
amazing?
thing. I think there's a lot of people that are afraid of AI, but I see it as just a fantastic companion. I think of it as a full-time assistant on my right hand who can help me with every single aspect: case conceptualization, brainstorming diagnoses, brainstorming differential diagnoses. So someone may come in and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm noticing XYZ. This person could have bipolar 2 disorder. And so I go to my assistant and mention what I'm seeing, and the assistant might say, yeah, that could be, but you should also consider this other thing. And I said, well, which should I focus on in the next session in order to differentiate those things? And say, ask these 3 questions, and then you'll be able to see, has these certain symptoms been at least 6 months long? Has it been at least a year? Is it transient? Do they have it every day? So the deep understanding of the DSM and the ability to think very, very logically, obviously I was able to do it on my own. And now with the AI, I just think I'm a much better clinician.
I could not agree more. I love the assistant and even the progress notes, really, when it'll write a progress note for me and it'll say, like, it'll like list the interventions I did, and I'll read it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that was an
Totally
intervention.
life changing. I
I'm
mean,
like, that was systematic desensitization. I didn't even think of it that way.
it's totally life changing because you've been practicing for a while. You naturally do certain interventions. And I'm eclectic. So I might be humanistic. I might do some role play. I might do some other experiential work. I might mix in a little bit of CBT. I'm doing some psychodynamic work. I'm doing some existential work. All this may happen in the same session. And if I'm going to document what my interventions are, it's been practicing well. Sometimes I don't even remember the names of it necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And it generates all of it. It's just wonderful. And the other thing I just have to say is the time savings. And when I started using it, I was really careful. I was really curious because I'm a scientist. I was really
Yeah.
curious, how much time is this going to save me?
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
so I used to spend, I know you're supposed to be able to write notes in 5 or 10 minutes. I never got like that. I got to the point where, I would get a little bit tired between sessions. And instead of doing my note right on the spot, I would wait till the end of the day. And then I'm sitting there having 6, 7 notes to write. And when you're tired, that takes 2 hours.
Oh my gosh. And
And
then even
so,
trying to remember what you talked about, like at the session at 9 a.m. versus the 6
yeah.
p.m. session. It's like, wait, what do we
And
even
so,
talk about?
seeing 16 clients in a week meant that I was spending about 15 minutes per note. And I was carefully documenting it. So I figured out I was spending about 4 hours to 4.5 hours a week on notes. And now with the Barry's AI scribe, 5 minutes. I think in the beginning, because I was using like earlier versions of it, I was looking at it carefully and I was maybe teaching the AI how to do things more in my style. And that was a little bit of an investment. But after I did that, my goodness, the notes are absolutely perfect. I do a quick read in and move it into my EHR, and it's less than 5 minutes. I'm saving 4 hours a week. And so I thought to myself, I got 4 hours. What am I going to do with the 4 hours? And you know what I decided to do?
What?
I did like, there's 4 hours. I could just say, okay, I'm going to relax for 4 hours. But I decided, you know what? Maybe I can take on two or more clients and
Nice.
give to myself 2 hours, which I spend swimming because that's the main thing I do for fun outside of therapy. But I took the other 2 hours and I thought I can do a deeper supervision with my associates. I can take on another client. So I decided to take on another client or two. And so you talk about ROI. I mean, I may end up seeing 6, 7, 8 additional client hours in a month. That's a lot of money in my practice. And, one of the things I talk a lot about because I interact a lot on social media, for example, Facebook pages that are devoted to therapists. And a lot of therapists don't have an abundance mentality. They're like, hey, does anybody have a cheaper alternative for QuickBooks? And I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? QuickBooks is world class. They have everything. It's all integrated. They put, why the fuck would you want to scrimp on that? Just get it. And then, hey, I don't want to, anybody have recommendations for a free AI scribe? Like, why do you want free? First of all,
Yeah.
here's my code. Go use it. And I will write out for them, gosh, do you want to save 4 hours a week? And what could you do with that? You could market better. You could supervise better. You could treat better. You could even take on an additional client or two a week. And I don't know, what do you charge? You charge $200. So all of a sudden you're going to have an extra $400 a week. And you're worried about spending $50 or $100 or something on different kinds of software. So yeah, a lot of therapists are frugal to their detriment, and they don't have the abundance mentality. You don't have this idea of, I need to invest in myself and that's going to compound itself. And it comes from confidence. I think you have to have that confidence that, yeah, I'm going to spend this money and I'm going to convert it into additional revenue.
I love that. That's such good advice. It really is. Gosh. And I see it all day too. It's just like, gosh, you guys are really cutting yourself short. Just use the tools that can help you live better, more
Mhm.
efficiently and all of that. Yeah. So I just love hearing you say that.
And we have burnout. I see so many clinicians saying, I'm seeing 20 or 22 client hours a week, but I'm not making ends meet. I need to increase to 25, 27, 28. But you know what? That's not sustainable. See, well, instead of doing that, why don't you get a better technology foundation? Why don't you do some analytics to figure out how to price yourself better in the marketplace, which, you should see all the like tools,
I know. Therapist brains just
charts and
literally
graphs
cut
that I
off.
have where I'm looking at what's the number of therapists per population. So I calculate demand, I look at supply, I look at income, and I find those zip codes that are the best ones to target and maximize that. Because the thing is that, I'm trying to get the clients that are most able to pay for private practice. And some people may say, well, geez, you're serving the wealthy. That allows me to have 2 or 3 slots open for people who pay $20. It's essentially a pro bono work. And so that's what I preach to people, have an abundance mentality and bring in that money so that you can serve the client that you're most passionate about.
Yeah. And then have a pro bono slot if you want to, if you want to serve somebody. Yeah, absolutely. Amazing advice. Such amazing advice. So let me ask you, with your background in tech startups and just seeing the evolution of tech and all of that, where do you see AI, tech, and mental health intersecting over the next 3 to 5 years? Do you have any predictions or thoughts or advice around that?
I mean, it is so exciting. One of the things that makes me excited is I thought, okay, I'm obviously an early adopter. I was building my own agents on top of ChatGPT before there were things like berries, but obviously I don't want to do all that. So I'm really glad that there are solutions like berries. But the thing that I've been intrigued by is I thought there would be a tremendous amount of resistance from the therapist community in general. They're afraid of losing their jobs. I think when all the mobile stuff started, they were scared to death that everybody's going to be texting their therapy, and that didn't really pan out. I think what this is mostly going to enable is, with my abundance thinking, it makes the pie bigger. What proportion of people are in therapy right now is still relatively low compared to what it could be. And I think that AI eventually will allow more and more people to get access who don't have access. And I think that more and more people will integrate AI to all aspects of their therapy practice. And in my case, all aspects of my life, because I'm an assistant with me because of my meta glasses that I'm walking around with, asking all kinds of things. But
Oh, really? You have those?
oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've seen them. I'm like, how good are they? Maybe we could talk about that.
I mean, just as a quick thing is
Yeah, yeah,
saying
yeah.
something like, "Where did I leave my wallet?" and
Oh
having the
my
glasses say,
gosh.
it's in the bedroom next to whatever, right?
That is
Or
awesome.
imagine you're wearing your glasses when you're in your refrigerator, then you're at the grocery store and like, oh crap, how many eggs should I buy? And the AI tells you
Wow.
something like, well, you've got 8 left and you eat about 2 a day. And so you're going to run out in 4 days.
Oh my
And you
gosh.
typically go to the grocery store once a week. So you've got to buy them now, right? And so you can do that kind of a thinking.
That is amazing. That is next level.
But to
Yeah.
answer your question, where do I see it
Yes.
going?
Yes, yes.
I was about to say that I've been noticing resistance from therapists, but recently I'm seeing more and more people try it. There was a post just yesterday where someone said, "Hey, anybody have recommendations for an AI scribe?" And I was surprised, like, 15 people said something. Now, there were a few people in there saying it's bad and
Oh,
uses
don't
a
do
lot of
it. You're training our
energy
replacements.
and you're destroying the environment. And so I put together some arguments about the environment and I posted there. I put some information about berries. I tried to educate them on how much time that they can save and that this actually helps them have a better work-life balance and be able to have less burnout. And so I think people are getting there. But what I've noticed is the ratio between advocates versus skeptics is definitely flipping. And I really believe that within a year, probably 50% of therapists will use, because it's the only way to compete. If you're not embracing tech,
Yeah,
you're not
you're
keeping
going to
up.
be in the
And
dust.
I actually made the analogy this way. I said, there were people way back when. I'm old enough to remember before there were word processing, before like Microsoft Word existed, and people were resistant to that. I remember like English classes in high school where teachers would say, wow, this is bad because you're not going to learn how to write, and people worried about penmanship. And, you used to have to organize your whole paper with an outline, but now you can just wing it and move things around. And people would thought that's going to be the end of good writing, but it wasn't. It actually accelerated writing. And I think this too will accelerate mental health.
I think you're so right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I guess you're kind of working in the tech sector anyway, probably with your niche. But I'm just wondering, like, are you finding that you're having to educate your clients on AI? Or, I know we're all supposed to do informed consent with our clients if we're using AI with them. Are you doing any of that education? Or are you finding that your clients are just right on board with it? Or you having to explain it a lot?
Yeah, I mean, probably 70, 80% of my clients worked in tech, and many of them are data engineers, data scientists, ML engineers. So they love it. They're excited by it. They ask me questions about it. I have it built into my informed consent. And, for people that are new to AI scribes, it's great that Berries provides language that you can pretty much cut and paste and modify and put in there. So I have that in there. And so the thing is that many people, when they're asked to sign informed consent, they scroll through the six
Yeah, it's
pages
like,
and
do,
sign.
do, do,
So
do,
the thing
do.
that I do, and I
Yeah.
think many therapists do, is in that first session, I do walk through all of that and get a double consent because I get the oral consent. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be recording this, and this is how long I store it for, and this is my deletion policy and things like that. And, I think people have questions about it. And of course, there's some people that said, I don't want you to do that. And I opt them out, and that's no problem. But I don't think I have many that do that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
people tend to embrace it. The other thing, by the way, is I'm not taking notes and I'm able to maintain eye contact throughout. And I used to have this and be sitting there, Now I will write down one or two things, but it's mostly because these are points I want to say later. Like they're in the middle of talking about something, how the clients are.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell
They're
you
like
something and
ruminating, and you're like, I
you
want to
want to
talk about
say
that. I want to
something
talk about
else,
that.
and then they tell another story. You're like, okay, I need to remember to go back. So that's the main reason I use it. I maybe write down 5 words a session, something like that.
Yeah, and you know what we're talking about at Barry's is like a real-time assistant that can prompt in the session to say, you might want to ask about that. You might want to inquire about that. Like real time, like interactions with the assistant running in the
Hmm.
background, which, seems really interesting to me. I don't know how you'd incorporate it, but they're beautiful the way they do the interface on berries. So I'm sure they'll figure out a good way to do it. But I just thought that was a really interesting concept, and I can't wait to see them bring that to life.
Yeah, I think that'll be useful for a number of people, especially when they're doing virtual. I personally like to be not distracted, so I don't know if I'm going to use that
Yeah, I know.
feature.
It's
But
kind
one
of
thing I do like that is related is I get help from Barry's to write up some notes that I send to the client afterwards. And I had this client recently, they left session, it was an in-person session, and I sat and I put together a follow-up email and I sent it to them. And by the time they got home, they had this thing and they replied and said, how the heck did you send these? Like they had, I love this. Like this is a fantastic, just sort of like a summary of here's what we've learned. Here's what we agreed you would work on. Here's what we decided we're going to talk about next week. And I'm like, wow, this is so pretty. Like, because a lot of times I think people think of therapy as just, this sort of like a black box and, is something that you pay a lot for. And like, what am I actually getting? Here they're actually getting something.
Yeah, no, I love that feature too, to be able to send homework assignments or use the assistant to create a worksheet or something that's sort of evidence-based and based on what you talked about in session. I've used it for that, and then copy paste it into that email format that you're talking about, because in Berries you can just like literally send an email to your client, a secure email right from the Berries interface if you want to, based on that last session, and that's such a cool feature
And
to
for
be able
some
to
of
do
my
that.
more sophisticated clients, they say, email, why use an email? So instead we have a shared workspace. And so we just put things there and they can go back and reference it anytime. They can put their own comments in there. They can journal in there. If it becomes, I think that, you asked about evolution. I think that therapy in general may evolve to being more asynchronous, combination of synchronous and asynchronous, where there's some back and forth that goes on between sessions. And that could be where an AI steps in a bit more and that the human therapist handles certain parts, but mostly just keeps an eye on what's happening between sessions.
Yeah, I totally foresee that as well. And we've even talked about it at Barry's, sort of a bot that now knows how you are as a therapist and could easily mimic your personality, your therapy style, the way you speak, the way you handle interventions and that sort of thing. And then
Sure.
being an intermediary that your client can actually consult with if you're not available, and use this as an intermediary to kind of help with the therapeutic
Yeah,
process. And the clinician being able to see that input and analyze it with the
absolutely.
assistant and all of that, like,
Yeah. I
how
mean, if you
amazing.
understand the tech and how LLMs work, these systems are extremely good at mimicking. And the language that is produced is very similar to what I do. So
It's amazing.
I think
Oh
it's a
my gosh.
fantastic assistant.
Yeah. I just love this conversation. So I like to always do like a lightning round at the end and just
Lightning
ask you
round.
some
Now I
questions,
got to
like
be on
based
my
on,
toes.
yeah, what we've talked about. So one tool you can't live without right now, tech or therapy related or not, just something that you're just using right now that's just kind of like game changer for you.
I mean, the most obvious one is the existence of video. I don't want to go to an office every day and being able to see clients and then go do my thing. And I think it helps clients also. Like this was one of the big benefits, I think, of the pandemic is everybody embraced the use of video and became comfortable with it. It's a simple one, but it's probably the biggest one because I'm spending, 15 hours a week at this.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of having to commute like in the old days. I mean, that was just, yeah, get to the office. The clients having to drive to the office. Like, I love telehealth and being able to do it over video. It's amazing to me. Best advice you've ever received during your career pivot when you were switching careers?
Slow down. I think it was about patience. Because I had worked in tech, you get rewarded by having solutions quickly. And as a therapist, you're sometimes wanting to solve a problem, but that's not always what the client wants. And so some of the early supervisors I had to like reel me into, Ken, you don't want to solve it right away. You want them, first of all, it's enabling. You want them to self-solve a little bit. You want to help them explore their own thoughts and feelings to guide them towards solutions. And obviously, sometimes we do solution focused work, but I think that was probably it. Slow down. You're not solving an engineering problem. You're helping a human being.
You don't have to get the database back up and
Yeah.
running in like 2.5 seconds or something. Yeah, that makes sense. The last question is a resource or a practice that keeps you grounded and inspired to keep doing this work?
I kind of two things to say. One is sometimes I see therapists posting again on Facebook therapy groups like, hey, what do you guys do to prevent burnout? Or, how do you re-energize? And I say to them, the therapy is actually the re-energize for me. Because I worked in a very, very stressful. Now, being a therapist is stressful, but I worked in extremely stressful, high-tech thing where you have to have a lot of knowledge. You have to manage people. And, I was working on products that 3 or 4 billion people might see in a day. And so there's very, very high pressure. And so for me, the self-care was being a therapist. Like people saying, well, what's your self-care? This is self-care already. So that's one part of it, which I realize is very unique. The other part is, I think, really clear boundaries about your work hours. For example, I see clients noon to 5, Monday through Thursday. That's it. I can get in 20 potentially. There's 5 slots, 4 days. But if it doesn't work, they're referred out. I'm not going to squeeze somebody in to the morning because morning is for me. I review my cases, I work out, I prepare, I study. I'm also a doctoral student, so I do my
Are you
doctoral
serious?
thesis work. Yeah. And so
That's amazing.
I'm going to probably finish in the next 3, 4 months. I'm at the
Oh my
very end of
gosh.
my doctoral studies.
That is fascinating. Oh my gosh.
So my answer is boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
that's what I
when you
said. You like
have
really
those
good boundaries.
it's really, really hard to be firm on them because someone says, hey, can I just meet, I'm like, well, you get an inch, then it becomes a mile. And pretty soon you're doing 8 p.m. sessions and you're getting up at 7 a.m. And you have to have that work-life balance.
Yeah. And very, very last question is, what do you hope people take away from this episode if they're listening?
Gosh, like the abundance mindset. Hey, I can do it. I'm going to embrace technology. I may have fears. People are going to help me along the way. I can build a great practice and have work-life balance and achieve happiness. The motto of my therapy practice, Mallon Advisory Counseling Services, we call MAX. So we're the Max Therapy crew on social media. But our motto is sort of like bring harmony and peace to individuals and families. And, that's sort of like the way I act. That's the themes we have. So all the people who work in there are really trying to bring calmness and peace and harmony, allow people to be mindful and enjoy their life.
I love that so much. Thank you. And how do people find you? I mean, you said online, your social media handle, but where do they reach out to you if they want to talk to you more about what
I
you're
think
doing?
just my website, mallonadvisory.com, has our small practice. It's me and 2 other therapists. It's kind of a boutique. We try to do specialized care, and I'm hiring more people right now, and so we'll be expanding, by 1 or 2 additional people. But I just wanted to stay kind of small so that I can keep the culture of harmony pervasive and just do excellent work.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
All
Thanks for
right.
taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.